The letter from the homeowners association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew it was trouble before I even opened it, because nobody sends good news in cream-colored envelopes with embossed letterhead. I'm Keith Zimmerman, and I'd been living in the Meadowbrook Springs subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona, for 3 years without any major issues. Sure, there'd been a notice about leaving my trash cans out too long once, and someone complained about my grass being a quarter-inch too tall during monsoon season, but nothing prepared me for what I read that morning. Dear Mr. Zimmerman, the letter began in that passive-aggressive tone that only HOA correspondents can achieve. It has come to our attention that the chimney cap on your residence at 4782 Desert Bloom Drive does not conform to the architectural standards outlined in Section 7.3.2 of the Meadowbrook Springs Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The current cap is a standard black metal dome style, whereas approved chimney caps must be copper tone or aged bronze to maintain the aesthetic integrity of our community. You have 30 days to replace the chimney cap with an approved model or face fines of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. Sincerely, Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. I stood in my kitchen, coffee getting cold in my hand, reading the letter 3 more times. The chimney cap. The chimney cap that came with the house when I bought it. The chimney cap that had been there for at least 15 years according to the home inspection report. That chimney cap was suddenly a problem. I walked outside into the already warm Arizona morning and stared up at my roof. From the ground, the chimney cap looked like a tiny black dot against the terracotta tiles. I couldn't imagine anyone noticing it unless they were specifically looking for something to complain about. My neighbor Frank was getting his newspaper from the driveway. He waved. Morning, Keith. You get one of those letters too? I held up the cream envelope. Chimney cap. Frank shook his head. Solar panels for me. Apparently mine are too reflective. They've been up there for 5 years, but now they're suddenly offensive. Who's even looking at this stuff? I asked, walking over to the property line. Patricia Hendricks drives around with binoculars, Frank said. My wife saw her last week, just cruising the neighborhood with binoculars pressed to her face like she's on safari. I'd met Patricia exactly twice. Once at the mandatory homeowner orientation when I moved in, and once at a community meeting about pool hours. She was in her early 50s, had that particular haircut that demanded to speak to managers everywhere, and wore pantsuits in shades of beige that somehow made her look both professional and aggressive simultaneously. I'm not spending money on this, I said. The cap is fine. It works. It keeps rain and animals out of my chimney. That's literally its only job. Frank gave me a sympathetic look that told me he knew I was fighting a losing battle. Good luck with that, buddy. I'm just replacing my panels, not worth the headache, but I wasn't Frank. I'd spent 10 years as a project manager at a construction firm before starting my own contracting business. I knew building codes, I knew regulations, and I knew when someone was making up rules to justify their existence. I called the HOA office that afternoon. A chirpy receptionist named Melissa answered. Hi, I'm calling about a violation notice I received regarding my chimney cap, I said, keeping my voice level. I'd like to speak with someone about the architectural standards being cited. That would be Patricia Hendricks. She's in a meeting right now, but I can have her call you back. When? Oh, probably within 48 hours. She's very busy. I have 30 days to fix this. I'd like to understand the requirements sooner rather than later. Melissa's voice took on a practiced tone. The covenants are available on our website, Mr. Zimmerman. And I've read the covenants. Section 7.3.2 says chimney caps should be aesthetically appropriate to the community standards. That's subjective. What specifically makes my current cap non-compliant? You'd need to discuss that with Mrs. Hendricks. Can I make an appointment? She doesn't do appointments. You can attend the next board meeting on the third Thursday of next month. I did the math. That's 5 weeks away. My deadline is 4 weeks. You could submit a written inquiry. Responses typically take 2 to 3 weeks. The system was designed to be impossible. I recognized it immediately. Create vague rules, give short deadlines, make it hard to get clarification, and most people will just comply rather than fight. I'll come to the office, I said. What are the hours? Tuesday and Thursday, 10 to 2. I'll be there Thursday. I showed up at the Meadowbrook Springs HOA office at 10 in the morning sharp. The office was located in a small commercial plaza at the subdivision entrance, sharing space with a real estate office and a nail salon. Inside, it looked like a dentist's waiting room decorated by someone who thought Tuscan Villa meant lots of fake plants and motivational posters about community. Melissa sat behind a desk, and she looked younger than she'd sounded on the phone. Early 20s, probably working this job between college classes. I'm here to see Patricia Hendricks, I announced. You have an appointment? I was told she doesn't do appointments. But I need to discuss my violation notice. Melissa glanced nervously toward a closed door behind her. She's working on the monthly newsletter right now. I'll wait. I sat in one of the uncomfortable chairs and pulled out my phone. I'd spent the previous evening researching Arizona HOA laws, and I'd discovered some interesting things. For instance, HOAs were required to provide specific written standards for architectural compliance. Vague aesthetic judgments weren't legally sufficient. They also had to give homeowners a hearing before imposing fines. 45 minutes passed. The door finally opened, and Patricia Hendricks emerged carrying a stack of papers. She wore a tan blazer over a white blouse, khaki pants, and sensible flats. Her hair was indeed cut in that short, severe style that seemed to be issued along with HOA board positions. Mrs. Hendricks, I stood up. Keith Zimmerman. I'd like to discuss my violation notice. She looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across her carpet. Mr. Zimmerman. As I stated in my letter, your chimney cap is non-compliant. The solution is simple. Replace it with an approved model. What's an approved model? Copper tone or aged bronze as specified in the letter. That's a color, not a model. What are the specific dimensions, style requirements? Manufacturer specifications. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The Architectural Review Committee has discretion to determine appropriateness. I'd like to submit my current chimney cap for review then. Maybe once the committee actually looks at it, they'll approve it. The committee has already reviewed it and found it lacking. When? I never received notice of a review. Patricia shifted her papers from one arm to the other. We conduct routine inspections of the community. Your property was inspected on March 8th. Nobody came to my property on March 8th. I work from home. I was there all day. External inspections don't require homeowner presence. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She turned back toward her office. I want to see the inspection report, I called after her. And the specific architectural standards, not just color descriptions, actual documented standards. She paused. Submit your request in writing. Responses take 2 to 3 weeks. That puts me past my deadline. Then I suggest you replace the chimney cap promptly. The door closed behind her. Melissa gave me an apologetic shrug. She's really busy with newsletter formatting. Spring edition is always complicated. I left feeling more determined than frustrated. Patricia's refusal to provide documentation meant she probably didn't have any. I'd worked with enough bureaucrats to know that the ones who actually had rules to back them up were happy to cite them chapter and verse. The ones who were making it up as they went along tried to avoid specifics. That evening, I drafted a formal written request for the following documents: the inspection report from March 8th, the specific architectural standards for chimney caps, including manufacturer specifications and style requirements, the minutes from the Architectural Review Committee meeting where my chimney cap was reviewed, and the list of approved chimney cap models. I sent it certified mail the next day. I also called a lawyer, not to sue anyone yet, but just to understand my options. His name was Richard Torres, and he'd handled HOA disputes before. "They're fishing," Richard said after I explained the situation. "Classic HOA overreach. They probably don't have specific standards. They just decided they don't like black chimney caps and are trying to force everyone to change them." Can they do that? Not really. Arizona law requires HOAs to have documented, reasonable standards that are consistently enforced. If they can't produce documentation, and if they haven't enforced this rule against everyone else with black chimney caps, you've got grounds to fight. How much would that cost? Fighting an HOA violation could be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 if it goes to court. But sometimes a letter from an attorney is enough to make them back down. That's $500. I did the math. A new chimney cap plus installation would probably run $800 to $1,000. A lawyer's letter was cheaper, but not by much. And there was no guarantee it would work. "Let me wait and see what they send me," I said. "If they actually have documentation, I'll just replace the cap. If they're bluffing, maybe we send the letter." "Your call. But don't wait too long. Once the fines start, they compound fast." I spent the weekend doing my own inspection of the neighborhood. I drove through every street in Meadowbrook Springs with my phone, photographing chimneys. Out of 63 houses with fireplaces, 41 had black chimney caps just like mine. 15 had copper tone or bronze caps. 7 had stainless steel caps. If Patricia was enforcing the copper tone or bronze only rule, she was doing it selectively. That was legally problematic for the HOA. I also noticed something interesting. Patricia's own house, a large territorial-style home on Desert Willow Court, had a black chimney cap. I took several photos of that one. 2 weeks after my written request, I received a response. Not from Patricia, but from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Martin Ashford with an office in Phoenix. "Dear Mr. Zimmerman," the letter read, "on behalf of the Meadowbrook Springs Homeowners Association, I am responding to your request for documentation regarding violation notice 2024-0847. The architectural standards for the community are established in the recorded CC and Articus, which you received upon purchase of your property. Section 7.3.2 clearly states that all exterior modifications and fixtures must be aesthetically appropriate to community standards. The Architectural Review Committee has determined that black metal chimney caps do not meet these standards. Your request for specific manufacturer specifications is noted, but the committee maintains discretion to evaluate appropriateness on a case-by-case basis. The March 8th inspection was conducted by Mrs. Hendricks as part of her duties as HOA president. No separate report is generated for routine inspections. You have 17 days remaining to comply with the violation notice before fines commence. Please contact our office if you have additional questions. It was impressive how many words they used to say absolutely nothing, no specific standards, no inspection report, no committee meeting minutes, just "we said so, therefore you must comply." I called Richard Torres again. "They're definitely bluffing," he confirmed. Case-by-case discretion is fine for subjective things like paint colors within an approved palette, but they need some baseline standards. And if they're not enforcing it consistently, that's selective enforcement, which is discriminatory. So what do I do? You've got two choices. Replace the cap to avoid the fight, or let the fines start and then sue them for selective enforcement and lack of proper standards. If you sue, you'll probably win, but it'll take time and money. What if I just replace the cap? Then they win, and they'll keep doing this to other people. But that's not your problem. I thought about Frank and his solar panels. I thought about how many other neighbors had probably received similar letters about minor, ridiculous things. I thought about Patricia Hendricks driving around with binoculars, looking for violations to justify her power trip. Let's send the letter, I said. Richard drafted a formal legal letter explaining that the HOA had failed to provide adequate documentation of its standards, was enforcing rules selectively, and was violating Arizona statutes requiring specific, documented architectural guidelines. He cited case law and gave them 14 days to withdraw the violation notice. The letter cost me $500. I considered it an investment in principle. 3 days after the letter was sent, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Zimmerman, this is Patricia Hendricks. I received a letter from your attorney. Yes. I find it very disappointing that you've chosen to take an adversarial approach to what should be a simple matter of community compliance. I find it disappointing that the HOA can't provide basic documentation of its standards, I replied. We don't need to provide specifications for every single architectural element. The CC and Articus give the committee authority to make aesthetic decisions. Consistently applied aesthetic decisions based on documented standards, I said, not arbitrary decisions targeting individual homeowners. Your chimney cap is not consistent with the community aesthetic. 41 other houses have the same cap, including yours, Mrs. Hendricks. There was a long pause. I don't appreciate being stalked, Mr. Zimmerman. I drove through the neighborhood looking at chimneys. That's not stalking. That's documentation. If you're enforcing a rule that copper tone or bronze caps are required, why do you have a black cap? Why do 40 other houses? Those are existing grandfathered installations. So is mine. It was installed in 2009, according to my home inspection report. The previous homeowner may not have obtained proper approval. That's not my problem. I bought the house as is with all existing fixtures. If the HOA had an issue with the chimney cap, it should have been disclosed at sale. Patricia's voice took on a sharp edge. Mr. Zimmerman, I'm trying to resolve this amicably. If you replace the chimney cap voluntarily, we can waive any fines and move forward. If you insist on litigation, this will become expensive and unpleasant for everyone involved. I'm not replacing something that isn't broken just because you decided to target my house. I haven't targeted your house. I'm enforcing community standards. Then enforce them consistently. Send violation notices to the 41 other houses with black caps, including your own. This conversation is over. You have 9 days until fines begin. She hung up. I immediately called Richard and recounted the conversation. She admitted selective enforcement, he said, sounding pleased. That helps. And the grandfathering claim is weak. If she's claiming existing installations are grandfathered, yours definitely qualifies. What happens when the fines start? We file suit. We'll ask for an injunction to stop the fines while the case is being heard. Given the evidence you've collected and their lack of documentation, I think we've got a strong case. How long will this take? Probably 6 months to a year. Maybe longer if they really dig in. I spent the next 9 days waiting. I also spent them talking to neighbors. It turned out I wasn't the only one being targeted. Frank had replaced his solar panels at a cost of $8,000. A couple on Saguaro Drive had been forced to repaint their house trim because the beige was too yellow, according to Patricia. A retired teacher on Ocotillo Lane had received a violation for her mailbox being weathered and had to replace it despite it being only 3 years old. Everyone had stories about Patricia Hendricks. She'd apparently been HOA president for 6 years, having run unopposed in the last 3 elections. Nobody wanted to challenge her because nobody wanted to deal with the drama. She had a reputation for vindictiveness. Cross her, and suddenly your trash cans were measured to ensure they met the size limits. Your lawn was inspected weekly for weeds, and any minor deviation from the rules resulted in immediate violation notices. One neighbor, a guy named Tom who lived 2 streets over, told me about Patricia's background. She'd been a paralegal before retiring and moving to Meadowbrook Springs. She had no family that anyone knew about, no visible hobbies except the HOA, and seemed to derive all her purpose from finding violations. She's lonely and bored, Tom said. The HOA gives her power, and power gives her meaning. That's why she's so aggressive about it. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. On day 31, I received another letter. This one informed me that I was now being fined $100 per day and that the fines would be added to my HOA dues. Failure to pay would result in a lien on my property. I called Richard. They started the fines. Okay, let's file suit. I'll get the paperwork together today. We'll sue for selective enforcement, violation of Arizona HOA statutes, and bad faith. We'll also file for an injunction to stop the fines immediately. What are my odds? Honestly, pretty good. They've got nothing but subjective opinions, and you've got photographic evidence of selective enforcement. The fact that Patricia's own house has a black chimney cap is devastating to their case. We filed suit in Maricopa County Superior Court 3 days later. The complaint laid out everything: the vague standards, the lack of documentation, the selective enforcement, and the apparent targeting of my property. We asked the court to void the fines, order the HOA to establish proper documented standards, and award attorneys' fees. The HOA's response was swift and aggressive. Martin Ashford filed an answer denying everything and claiming that the HOA had absolute discretion over architectural decisions. He also argued that I should have exhausted administrative remedies by appearing before the board before filing suit. That's garbage, Richard said when we reviewed their response. They don't have a meaningful administrative process. You tried to meet with Patricia and she refused. You sent written requests and they ignored them. The law doesn't require you to go through meaningless motions when the HOA is clearly acting in bad faith. The injunction hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, the fines kept accumulating. I was now supposedly in debt to the HOA for $2,100. I also started getting nastier correspondence, not official violation notices but anonymous notes in my mailbox. "You're ruining our property values," one read. "Just replace the cap and stop being difficult," said another. "People like you shouldn't live in HOA communities," a third proclaimed. I suspected Patricia was behind them, but I couldn't prove it. The morning of the injunction hearing, I put on my best suit and met Richard at the courthouse. It was a Thursday in late spring, and Phoenix was already heating up toward summer. The courthouse was busy with dozens of cases, and we waited in a courtroom until our case was called. Judge Marilyn Fletcher presided. She was in her 60s, had a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, and apparently had heard a lot of HOA cases over her career. Richard presented our argument first, showing the photos of 41 black chimney caps throughout the neighborhood, including Patricia's. He presented the vague CC and R language. He presented the HOA's failure to provide any documented standards or inspection reports. "Your Honor," Richard said, "this is textbook selective enforcement. The HOA president has singled out my client for a violation that she herself commits, that dozens of other homeowners commit, and for which the HOA has no specific documented standards. The fines are punitive and unjustified. We ask the court to enjoin further fines while the underlying case is resolved." Martin Ashford stood up for the HOA. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, and he spoke with the confidence of someone who defended a lot of HOAs. "Your Honor, the Meadowbrook Springs HOA has broad discretion under its CC and Articus to make aesthetic decisions. The plaintiff purchased property in a community with those rules. He agreed to abide by them. The fact that the HOA hasn't yet enforced the rule against other properties doesn't mean it can't start enforcement with this property. The plaintiff's remedy is to comply with the violation notice, not to sue." Judge Fletcher looked unimpressed. "Counselor, I'm looking at these photographs." "That's Mr. Ashford's house in Exhibit 14, Mrs. Hendricks, Your Honor, the HOA president. Mrs. Hendricks has the same black chimney cap that she's fining the plaintiff for having. The HOA is in the process of reviewing all properties and will be issuing additional violation notices as appropriate." "When did that process start?" Martin hesitated. "Following the plaintiff's complaint. So after he sued, the HOA decided to start enforcing this rule against everyone. The HOA has always intended to enforce its architectural standards, but only started doing so after being sued for selective enforcement. That's not good faith, Counselor." Judge Fletcher looked at her notes. "I'm also troubled by the lack of specific standards. The CC and Articus say aesthetically appropriate. That's subjective. What guidance do homeowners have about what's appropriate and what isn't? The Architectural Review Committee provides guidance on a case-by-case basis. So homeowners have to guess and hope they guess right. Homeowners can submit requests for approval before making changes. This chimney cap has been on the property for 16 years. The plaintiff didn't install it. Why is he being held responsible for a fixture that pre-existed his ownership? The violation notice gave him opportunity to correct the issue." Judge Fletcher looked skeptical. "I'm granting the injunction. The fines are stayed pending resolution of the underlying case. The HOA is ordered to stop collection efforts. We'll schedule a trial date for the selective enforcement claim." She banged her gavel. I felt a wave of relief. At least the fines were stopped. As we left the courtroom, Martin Ashford pulled Richard aside. "We should talk settlement." "I'm listening," Richard said. "The HOA will withdraw the violation notice if your client agrees to drop the suit. And attorney's fees. Each side bears their own." Richard looked at me. I shook my head. "No. They need to establish actual standards and apply them consistently. Otherwise, they'll just do this to the next person." Martin's expression hardened. "Your client is being unreasonable." "Your client is violating state law," Richard countered. "We'll see you at trial." The trial was set for September, 4 months away. In the meantime, life in Meadowbrook Springs got uncomfortable. Patricia began enforcing every rule against me with zealous precision. My trash cans were measured weekly. I received violation notices if they were left out 5 minutes past the 7 p.m. deadline. My lawn was inspected every 3 days, and I received notices about individual weeds. My house number was cited for insufficient reflectivity and had to be replaced. My doormat was deemed inappropriate colors. because it had an Arizona Cardinals logo. I documented everything. Every petty violation notice, every measurement Patricia took, every piece of harassment. Richard said it was all evidence of bad faith and retaliation. Other neighbors started receiving violation notices too. Patricia was trying to create the appearance of consistent enforcement by suddenly targeting everyone with black chimney caps. Frank got a notice. Tom got a notice. The retired teacher got another notice, this time about her chimney cap, even though she'd already paid thousands for the mailbox. But something interesting happened. People started pushing back. Tom refused to replace his cap and joined my lawsuit. So did Frank. So did 3 other neighbors. What started as my individual fight became a class action against the HOA. Patricia tried to have us all declared in violation and assessed fines, but Judge Fletcher extended the injunction to cover all the plaintiffs. No fines could be collected until the case was resolved. The HOA board held an emergency meeting in July. It was poorly attended because it was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when most people were at work. I took the afternoon off to go. Patricia sat at a folding table in the community center with 4 other board members, 2 men and 2 women, all retirees who looked uncomfortable with the attention. About 20 homeowners showed up, most of them supporting our lawsuit. This meeting is to discuss the ongoing litigation and its impact on the community, Patricia began. The board has authorized legal expenses up to $50,000 to defend against these frivolous claims. A woman in the back raised her hand. That's $50,000 of our HOA dues. We must defend the integrity of our covenants, Patricia said. Why? I asked. Why not just establish clear standards and move on? We have clear standards, Mr. Zimmerman. You simply don't like them. You have vague language that you're interpreting arbitrarily and selectively. The board disagrees. Tom stood up. Patricia, you have a black chimney cap. Why haven't you replaced yours? I've ordered a replacement. It will be installed next month. After 16 years of having it, and only after you got sued. The timing is irrelevant. A man I didn't recognize spoke up. I move that we recall Patricia Hendricks as HOA president and elect new leadership. Patricia's face flushed red. You can't do that. Actually, the man said, according to our bylaws, any member can call for a recall vote with a petition signed by 20% of homeowners. I have that petition. 37 signatures. He handed papers to Patricia. She looked at them like they were contaminated. This is inappropriate during active litigation, she said. The bylaws don't say anything about litigation, the man countered. We want to vote at the next regular meeting. The other board members looked at each other nervously. One of them, an older man named Bob, spoke up. That sounds reasonable. We should probably settle this lawsuit anyway. It's expensive and divisive. We're defending the community's rights, Patricia insisted. You're defending your ego, Bob said quietly, and it's costing everyone money. The meeting devolved into argument. Patricia insisted the lawsuit must be fought to the bitter end. The other board members suggested settlement. Homeowners shouted questions and complaints. Eventually, Patricia adjourned the meeting abruptly and stormed out. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Richard. Big news. The HOA's attorney contacted me. They want to settle. What are they offering? Everything. They'll withdraw all violation notices against everyone. They'll establish clear, documented architectural standards and submit them to homeowners for review. They'll pay our attorney's fees. And Patricia Hendricks is stepping down as HOA president. Why the sudden change? Apparently, the rest of the board went behind her back. She wanted to keep fighting, but they voted to settle without her approval. She's furious, but she's outvoted. I felt a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. So we won. You won. All of you. The settlement is contingent on dropping the class action, but you get everything you were asking for. We signed the settlement agreement in late August. The HOA paid $32,000 in attorney's fees. All violation notices were withdrawn. A committee of homeowners was formed to draft new architectural standards that were specific, documented, and reasonable. Patricia Hendricks didn't attend the meeting where the settlement was announced. She'd submitted her resignation letter the day before, effective immediately. According to Tom, she'd put her house up for sale and was moving somewhere in New Mexico. The new architectural standards were completed in October. They specified that chimney caps could be black, bronze, copper tone, or stainless steel, as long as they were properly maintained. They included actual specifications for sizes, styles, and acceptable manufacturers. Most importantly, they required that any rule be enforced consistently across the entire community. Bob was elected the new HOA president. His first act was to apologize to everyone who'd been targeted by Patricia's enforcement spree. His second act was to reduce HOA dues by 15%, explaining that much of the budget had been going to Patricia's pet projects like the monthly newsletter that nobody read. Life in Meadowbrook Springs improved dramatically. Violation notices became rare and reasonable. The community felt less like a police state and more like a neighborhood. People waved to each other again instead of worrying about being reported for infractions. I kept my black chimney cap, of course. It still worked perfectly, keeping rain and animals out of my chimney just like it had for 16 years. Frank invited me over for a beer one evening in November. We sat on his back patio, looking at his solar panels that he'd spent $8,000 replacing. "You should have fought it," I said. He shrugged. "Probably, but I'm not a fighter like you. I just wanted peace." "Sometimes you have to fight for peace," I said. "Otherwise, people like Patricia just keep taking and taking." "True, but most people aren't like you. They don't have the energy or money to fight HOAs." He was right. I'd been lucky. I had a flexible job, some savings, and a good lawyer. A lot of people would have just replaced the chimney cap and swallowed the injustice. I thought about that a lot in the following months. The system was designed to favor the HOA, to make resistance expensive and exhausting. Most people couldn't afford to fight even when they were clearly in the right. But sometimes, one person fighting changed things for everyone. My stubborn refusal to replace a perfectly good chimney cap had exposed Patricia's abuse of power and led to real reforms in how Meadowbrook Springs was governed. In December, the community held a holiday party at the neighborhood park. It was better attended than any event in years. People actually seemed happy to be there, no longer worried about being scrutinized for violations. Bob approached me with a plastic cup of punch. "You know, you probably saved this place," he said. "I just wanted to keep my chimney cap." "You did more than that. You reminded everyone that HOAs are supposed to serve homeowners, not control them." Patricia forgot that. She thought she was a queen ruling subjects. I looked around at the neighbors chatting, kids playing, the relaxed atmosphere. "She's gone now. That's what matters." "I heard she's having problems in New Mexico too," Bob said with a slight grin. "Apparently, she bought in an HOA community there and is already fighting with the board about her fence height." I laughed. Some people never learn. As winter settled over the Arizona desert, I settled back into normal life. Work was busy, the holidays were approaching, and my only interaction with the HOA was paying monthly dues that had gotten cheaper. My chimney cap remained black, slightly weathered but perfectly functional. Every time I saw it from the driveway, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about the cap itself anymore. It was about standing up to unreasonable authority, fighting for what was right, and winning against a system designed to make individuals lose. Frank replaced his solar panels with panels that were somehow less reflective, even though they were functionally identical to his original ones. He never got the $8,000 back, but at least he didn't have to worry about violation notices anymore. Tom started a neighborhood watch group that had nothing to do with crime and everything to do with watching the HOA. He created a shared document where homeowners could report unreasonable requests or concerns about HOA overreach. If Bob or the board started sliding back into Patricia-style behavior, the community would catch it early. The retired teacher on Ocotillo Lane got her mailbox money back too, surprisingly. It turned out Patricia had used HOA funds to purchase approved mailboxes and then sold them to homeowners at markup. Bob discovered this during a financial audit and insisted on refunds. Patricia had technically committed fraud, though the amounts were small enough that nobody pursued criminal charges. She just paid back the difference, adding to her reasons for leaving Arizona entirely. I learned a lot from the experience. I learned that HOAs operate in a legal gray area where they have significant power but minimal oversight. I learned that most board members are volunteers who don't fully understand their legal obligations. I learned that one power-hungry person can turn a community into a dictatorship if nobody stops them. I also learned that most people want peace more than justice. Frank wasn't wrong to replace his solar panels. He valued his time and mental health over $8,000 and principle. That was his choice, and I didn't judge him for it. But I also learned that sometimes one person fighting makes a difference. If I just replaced my chimney cap, Patricia would have kept targeting other people. The HOA would have kept operating without proper standards or accountability. Life in Meadowbrook Springs would have remained uncomfortable and tense. By February of the following year, things had stabilized completely. The new architectural standards were in place, being consistently enforced by a committee of volunteers who actually read the guidelines before making decisions. Bob ran the HOA with transparency, sending out quarterly financial reports and holding regular meetings at convenient times. Patricia's house sold in March. A young couple with 2 kids bought it. They were friendly, normal people who seemed happy just to have a nice home in a good neighborhood. When they moved in, they asked me about the area. "It's great now," I told them honestly. "The HOA used to be a problem, but new management fixed it. We almost didn't buy here because of HOA horror stories," the husband said, "but our realtor said things had gotten much better." "They have," I confirmed. "Just make sure to read the architectural standards if you're planning any exterior changes. They're detailed now, which is good. No surprises." Life continued peacefully. I worked, maintained my house, enjoyed the Arizona weather, and never thought much about my chimney cap except when it rained and I appreciated that it was doing its job. In late spring, I received a piece of mail from an address in Las Cruces, New Mexico. It was from Patricia Hendricks. "Mr. Zimmerman," it read, "I'm writing to apologize for my behavior during my tenure as HOA president. I have spent considerable time reflecting on my actions and realize that I let my commitment to community standards override common sense and fairness. You were right to challenge the violation notice. I had no documented basis for it and was enforcing rules inconsistently. I'm sorry for the stress and expense I caused you and other homeowners. I hope Meadowbrook Springs is thriving under new leadership. Sincerely, Patricia Hendricks." I read the letter twice. It seemed genuine, though I suspected her new HOA troubles in New Mexico had given her perspective on being on the receiving end of unreasonable enforcement. I decided to write back. Mrs. Hendricks, thank you for your letter. I appreciate the apology. I hope you found a community where you're happy and where the HOA operates reasonably. Meadowbrook Springs is doing well. The new standards you prompted us to create have actually made the community better. Sometimes conflict leads to positive change. I wish you well. Keith Zimmerman. I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. Patricia had been wrong, but she'd also been a person looking for purpose and meaning in the wrong place. Her need for control and authority had hurt people, but she'd paid a price for it. She'd lost her position, her reputation, and apparently her peace in her new community. The whole experience taught me that HOA disputes are rarely just about rules. They're about power, control, community, and how we treat each other when we disagree. Patricia had treated homeowners as subjects to be managed. Bob treated us as neighbors to be respected. That difference in approach made all the difference. As summer approached again, marking a full year since the lawsuit was settled, I hosted a barbecue at my house. Frank came, Tom came, Bob came, and about 15 other neighbors showed up. We ate burgers, talked about sports and work and kids, and enjoyed being a normal neighborhood. Nobody mentioned chimney caps. Nobody worried about violation notices. We just existed together peacefully in our little corner of Scottsdale, Arizona. My black chimney cap remained on my roof, slightly faded now but still functional. It would probably last another decade at least. And when it finally needed replacing, I'd check the architectural standards, choose an approved model, and install it without drama. But I'd never forget what that chimney cap represented. It represented the importance of standing up for yourself. It represented the necessity of questioning authority when authority is wrong. It represented the power of documentation, evidence, and legal knowledge when facing institutional pressure. Most importantly, it represented the fact that one person refusing to comply with an unjust demand can change an entire system for the better. I'd kept my chimney cap, won my case, reformed my HOA, and helped create a better community for everyone. All because I received a letter on a Tuesday morning and decided that compliance wasn't always the answer. Sometimes, the answer was to fight back with facts, persistence, and principle. And sometimes, just sometimes, fighting back actually worked. The chimney cap was just a chimney cap, a piece of metal on my roof that kept water out. But it had become a symbol of something larger. The importance of reasonable rules, fair enforcement, and the courage to challenge systems that operate on arbitrary power instead of documented standards. Meadowbrook Springs was better now because of that fight. And I was proud that when tested, I'd chosen principle over peace, justice over convenience, and reform over compliance. The letter from Patricia still sat on my desk. I kept it as a reminder that people can change, that conflict can lead to growth, and that even the most difficult adversaries are human beings capable of reflection and apology. But I also kept the file of all the violation notices, all the legal documents, and all the photos of 41 black chimney caps throughout the neighborhood. Those documents were a reminder too. A reminder that power unchecked becomes tyranny, that communities need vigilance, and that sometimes you have to fight for what's right even when it's expensive and exhausting. As I stood in my driveway one evening, looking up at my roof, and that small black chimney cap silhouetted against the sunset, I felt satisfied. Not because I'd won a legal battle, but because I'd helped create a place where people could live without fear of arbitrary enforcement, where rules were reasonable and fair. and where a homeowners association actually served homeowners instead of controlling them. The chimney cap would eventually need replacing. Everything does, given enough time. But when that day came, it would be because of actual wear and necessary maintenance, not because someone with binoculars and too much authority decided to abuse their power. And that made all the difference.